Racism is absolutely alive and well in this country.
There was a lot of anger because there's so much hurt.
Reconciliation is not my responsibility, is not just Indigenous people's responsibility. Let's change, let's transform, let's heal. Welcome to Two Aunties and Reconciliation. Good day, everybody. Welcome back to our episode on truth, healing, and reconciliation. It's just Shelley and I again speaking on this topic and space and doing a lot more sharing about what this is. And again, for any new viewers that are just joining us, my name is Shapela Matsiam, also known as Chief Leanne Joe. That's my given English name. I come from the Squamish Nation. I was born and raised on the beautiful shores of North Vancouver and where my people are from. And I'm also a descendant of the Tsleil-Waututh people, as well as the Kwakwaka'wakw people on the east coast shores of Vancouver Island. And I'm here with my co-host, the amazing, beautiful woman, Shelley Joe. I will ask her to introduce herself to our viewers.
So you're very well connected.
Very. True blue West Coast Indian right here.
True blue. Gela Kesla, Nugwa Hekwagela Ogwa. My traditional name is Hekwagela Ogwa. My English name is Shelley Joseph. I greeted you with the word Gela Kesla, which means come well with me on this journey. Today, specifically, this journey on truth, healing, and reconciliation. I'm the youngest daughter of Chief Dr. Robert Joseph and my late mother, Donna Joseph, who were both Kwakwaka'wakw.
Awesome. Again, welcome everybody. We're going to dive into some truth in the truth and healing and of reconciliation. I want to begin with these things are all interconnected. They're all synonymous with each other. They are not separate pieces of work in this space for, again, reconciliation to truly happen, to truly be in that journey. All of us, not just Indigenous peoples, but all settler Canadians, all newcomers, need to be in a space of knowing the truth, understanding that truth, being with that truth. Of course, generally speaking, being uncomfortable with that truth. And through that is where the healing comes in. Because the majority of the work in reconciliation and those that are educating and training and facilitating and leading and guiding and holding space for reconciliation are Indigenous peoples.
Yeah.
And while we do that, there is an absolute requirement for healing as well. Yeah. And your, father, Dr. Chief Robert Joseph, has instilled that, I hope, across the country very poignantly, that without truth, we don't have reconciliation.
Yeah.
But we also need that healing, huge healing throughout all of this. Because, I'm going to be truthful when I'm facilitating or guiding or holding spaces for reconciliation. It can be triggering, right? When you're sharing your personal stories, when you're sharing what little I do know about my parents' experience at residential school, because it is very little, because they did not share the extensiveness of what had happened to them in those spaces. There's always tears, there's always pain, there's always hurt, you feel that harm, you feel that suffrage, right? You get angry, and it's uncomfortable, even for us when we're truly sharing our lived experience with you, when we're doing this work. And it's hard, and you can get extremely tired, extremely exhausted in your 4-body system when you're doing this work. So thus why the healing piece. And I also have to move through some spaces when I get really tired and exhausted from doing this work and holding that space, holding that energy for it. I have to forgive, because I do get angry and I do get upset, and it just
I know.
over and over again, because you're just constantly reminded of the trauma.
Yeah.
You're constantly reminded of your oppression. You're constantly reminded of harm and just all of the negative spaces that come from our history. Because there isn't a lot that we can celebrate in that history,
In Canada's history.
in Canada's history. And so, again, this is why the healing aspect of is, and again, why we're really spending time really delving into this space, because I think it's truly important. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'll have you share a bit about what your thoughts are around this truth healing and reconciliation.
Yeah, I've been in and around the Indian residential school file experience since the early to mid 80s. I remember hearing my dad speak about it. There were some people from the Nuu-chah-nulth who were going to court back in the 80s. And so he was called in to support them in whatever way he
Right.
could. And so I've, been hearing murmurs of this since the 80s. And fast forward to...
Which is our whole entire, basically, adult life.
Yeah, I was a teenager.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I knew nothing about it. I didn't even know... Well, I knew my parents went to the school called St. Mike's.
Right.
That was it. And the building was there most of my life. It's gone now. And every time, we would drive by, they would say, "Oh, I went to school there. I slept in that room there." But we never heard anything
Right.
of the experiences that they went through. Fast forward to the it was probably 1999. The BCAFN, the leadership, called my dad in for a meeting. They wanted his support and input about this topic of Indian residential schools. And from that meeting, he was literally appointed the ED of the Indian Residential School Survivor Society. He didn't even know he was in a job interview or anything. They're like, "Can you leave the room for a minute?" And he comes back, and next thing you know, he's the ED of the Indian Residential School Survivor Society. In that position, beginning in 1999, he traveled across Canada, spearheading roundtable conversations with survivors all across Canada, bringing them together to talk about the experiences that they've had. There was a lot of anger because there's so much hurt. And so a lot of anger and, pounding the tables. I want, we need justice, and on and on it went. But ultimately, the outcome of those roundtable discussions all across Canada with survivors from all across Canada, it was the survivors themselves who wanted the truth and healing and reconciliation.
Right.
They wanted truth and reconciliation. So this wasn't something that the federal or provincial governments
Right.
probably never even entered their minds at all.
Right.
So this was something that was led by survivors. And I think that's often a misconception too.
Right.
People get caught up in the word reconciliation because...
And they forget about the truth. They forget about the healing part.
Yeah. And we can't have the healing without everybody having that understanding of the truth, without having all Canadians validate our parents' experience.
Yes.
And their parents and their parents.
Exactly.
They have to hear those really hard truths about what was done to them. And I call that Canada's history.
Yes.
It's not ours.
No.
We didn't impose this on ourselves.
No, not at all.
Our legislations put in place by the federal and provincial governments that they did to Indigenous people.
Exactly.
That's Canada's history.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think we've spoken to that in our other episodes around some of the history, the Indian Act, all of the acts that preceded the Indian Act, right? And all that was instituted by government to create what we have today.
Yeah. They wanted, quote unquote, from, the government books, simulate the Indians into the Canadian body politic
Right.
until there were no more Indians. That
Right.
was their true intentions.
Yes.
So this wasn't, accidentally things happened to us.
No.
It was intentional.
Exactly. 100%. 100%. And I'll acknowledge that's for Canadians that still don't know that they don't know that that's our truth, that again, that's uncomfortable to hear, but that is our truth. That's our lived experience. That is yours, it's mine, it's my mom's, it's my dad's, etc. It's generations of our families who have faced that Canada's historical truth.
Yeah. Yeah. The impositions of all the Indian Act and the laws that came with that, and having our parents, their natural firstborn speaking language literally beat out of them. My father went to Indian residential school when he was 5. He turned 6 a few weeks later. But he only spoke Kwakwa.
Right.
He had never heard English. He had never seen a white person in his life. He grew up in a tiny village and was being raised by his grandmother. And when he got to that school, it was almost instantly that they were cuffing him on the ears every time he spoke English. And they were, basically telling him, you're not listening. We told you to speak English.
Right.
And so they smacked him on the ears daily until his ears were bleeding. They had burst both eardrums and infections happened. And that went on for the first couple of years he was in school, just constant earaches and oozing. They didn't do anything for him. There was didn't give him pain medication or soothe him as he cried. It was, stop crying or do it again kind of treatment. But literally to have his language beaten out of him that way.
Yeah.
So today, he's almost completely deaf now in both ears.
Right.
He wears hearing aids, although he does joke about how peaceful the world is when he takes them out.
Right.
But that's his truth.
Yes.
Yeah, that's his lived experience as a 5-year-old boy.
Yeah. I remember my grandmother speaking about, because she spoke so much about and highly regarded receiving an education, right, for us, like all of her grandchildren. And the struggle for her, again, was same thing. Literally, they tried to beat the language out of her. And full fluent speaker, never spoke English with anybody, etc. Lived a little in, of course, in a little bit bigger town. But again, just blows my mind, that the viciousness and the amount of harm and the amount of abuse that our parents, our grandparents, our aunts and our uncles, cousins, even my husband, who's, like I said, he's a day school survivor. He didn't go there for long because they finally shut it down when he was quite young. But again, just the horror stories I've heard.
Yeah.
And again, they're minute, small, they're not in the graphic detail of, I'm sure, what sits in the archives, of the residential school society, as well as, in Manitoba, where the National Center on Truth and Reconciliation archives all of those stories as well. And, and my husband's uncle is a poet. He's publishing his second book. But for him, that was a way to heal.
Right.
Through all of that. Because he, too, went to residential school and, same thing. Yeah. Beaten, abused, didn't really receive a true education by any means. Yeah. Exactly. But he has used poetry and used that written word and as a form of storytelling with others about his experience, And I think his second book may be leaning in more into that healing aspect of
Oh,
this work, right? And it's been a beautiful journey to witness that, despite the fact that our parents and aunts and uncles and grandparents went through this, are willing to forgive or willing to heal or willing and wanting to let it go,
yeah.
right? And I think that's an important piece to all of this, because it allows me to not only bear witness to that journey, but just, again, really engage with that myself, right? Like, because I did share in a previous episode of how harmed I feel when I hear, you know, new Canadians and settler Canadians fluently speaking and freely speaking their
Their
language
own languages, yeah.
without repercussion, without nothing. Literally,
Yeah.
just they're truly 100% freely allowed to be who they are and communicate in a language that is um, original to them.
Yeah, from another land.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
And we weren't allowed to.
no, and the fact that, your dad is deaf because
Yeah.
that was literally beaten out of him or tried to
He
anyway.
tried to, yeah.
Tried to, right?
Yeah.
And for me, it also resonates with me just the immense resiliency of our people,
Yeah, absolutely.
right? To not lose that language, to speak it still, to, again, despite the potlatch ban for 67 years in this
Yeah.
country, where it was illegal for us to do any ceremony in this country, that we still have these. We were
Yeah.
still, we went underground
Exactly.
and potlatched and, and
Able to maintain some of the
exactly,
ancient traditions that way.
exactly. And which is like vital
Yeah.
to our existence, right? Because without,
Yeah. So many things happened on different levels, unseen,
Mm,
for you and I to sit here and be able to talk about this and have hope and do everything we can to make sure that doesn't happen for our kids.
no, exactly.
You mentioned your husband went to day school. So this, I don't consider us old.
No,
This isn't historical.
no,
This was in our lifetimes. I grew up off reserve. My dad decided we were going to live off reserve, go to public
yeah,
school.
same with us.
As Indian residential schools were still running,
Exactly,
and he didn't want us going there. And
exactly,
if we had lived on the reserve, chances of us being taken were very high.
exactly,
This is in my lifetime.
exactly.
I didn't know these things growing up. I know it now.
Right.
I also came, when I was working with Reconciliation Canada, doing research and history and all that, that the last school in Canada closed in 1996.
Mhm.
In 1996,
1996.
my daughter was 6 years old.
Yep.
I shuddered and I literally started crying, thinking of if somebody came and took
Mm-hmm.
my child.
Yep.
The heartbreak. And then that brought me to all of the villages.
Yep.
Who were left with that heartbreak.
Yep.
So it wasn't just the children going away, experiencing everything that happened in the schools. It was the devastation in the villages.
Right.
So the impact of what they did was widespread, whether people went to the schools or not. The villages themselves were absolutely devastated by the children being taken. I know, we mentioned it in another episode. I grew up hearing all the time, but if not for our children, what would our purpose be? And in almost every single Indigenous community worldviews and practices and values, the children are at the center of everything. The children. And so the impact, the devastation was felt by everybody,
Yep.
not just whoever attended the schools, but by everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. And if you think of those kids that went to those schools, not only were they physically beaten, and but the lack of love and compassion.
Yep.
I mean, it's proven in scientific studies today how important that is for a child to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel valued, to have physical touch that is
To be-
safe
to
and
be
loving and
connected,
endearing.
to feel like they belong.
They were denied all of that.
Yeah.
Those fundamental, what they say children need growing up.
Mm-hmm.
All of the children who went to those schools didn't get that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There was no love. There was no, I believe in you. You'll amount to something someday.
You have purpose.
Yeah. You're so smart.
You're beautiful.
Yeah. They never heard any of that. It was day in and day out of dirty little.
Can you,
stupid little.
I can't imagine not hearing I love you
Yeah.
like a gazillion times a day.
Yeah.
I can't. I tell my son a gazillion times a day.
Yeah.
I love him.
Yeah. I actually grew up not hearing it.
Yep.
Because
Same with my husband.
My parents went.
Yep. Same with my husband.
No clue. They had no clue how to be parents. They had no clue how to.
Right.
They could clean. My mother was OCD because of her experience in Indian residential school. So we were like OCD clean all the time.
Yep.
But everything else was, it was rough until my parents sobered up in 1977.
Yeah.
And even then it was rough because now they were sober but still didn't have the tools. And so that was a long time, growing, trying to figure things out when there weren't resources like there is now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, in the foresight, whether they knew it or not, to know that they had to do better, that they wanted to do better, that they wanted to heal, that they wanted to forgive, that despite what had happened to them and the generations before them, like their parents and then their grandparents who went to these schools as well, despite all that, despite trauma, despite alcoholism, despite other addictions or whatever was going on as a result of what was put upon them, this willingness and this thriving and this desire to be better, though. I've always witnessed that. I've always witnessed that in your parents, my parents, my aunts and my uncles, and every single one of our family is always striving to have that, right? And where it's easy to be able to say, no, I just want to be holy in my addiction. I don't want to heal, and live in that fear or live in that trauma. And not to say that there are people in our communities and our nations and our families that aren't there currently. But we were lucky enough that, our parents were willing to do that work and had the bravery and the curiosity and, again, the resilience to do that, to do the work, to do it internally, to do it externally, and to still, every time I hear your dad speak, every time, whether it's on a recording and I've seen it like 50, 100 times, or when I see him in person, or when we're just sitting at each other's houses having conversation, just the love, right? Just the love that oozes out of them. Same with my mom. My mom just loves everybody. And, is the door's always open. You're always welcome. The coffee will be on or the tea will be there or, we will feed you. And, if you need a place to stay, it's always there. Just that graciousness and kindness, again, despite what happened to them. And I hope sharing that, I hope that our viewers and listeners can resonate with that and understand that we have the capacity to heal, to grow, to thrive. And
complete transformation that our parents did in a world that didn't want us to do that was, it's really awesome. Yeah.
It's awe-inspiring and it's just to witness it. And I hope that that's, a call to action, again, that resonates with settler Canadians and newcomers and everybody, that this is why truth is important. This is why the healing is important, that we can't automatically jump to the tick boxing and the solutions and the actions. Because when I do this work and when I am facilitating and guiding space around reconciliation or economic reconciliation, Of course, a majority of it, especially when you're just beginning in that space, is just truth telling. And everybody's just like, but where's the actions? Where's the solutions? And I'm just like, and I'm sitting there and I'm shaking my head and I'm like, my heart is hurting and I feel sorry. But I'm also angry, right? And frustrated
Yeah.
with them. Because I'm just like, you are not understanding the importance and the call to the truth.
Yeah.
Right? Like, did you actually read the Truth and Reconciliation report?
Yeah.
Have you read like a gazillion books that are out there? A gazillion other reports and calls that are out there? Because again, this roadmap has been laid. There are many spaces of learning available to you.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's that difficult or that hard or that challenging for us as Indigenous peoples to have the expectation that you do that work. I don't think it's that hard.
No.
We are willing to heal, grow, learn, thrive, be better, do better, act better, and be amazing human beings, despite the fact that we're the ones that actually have suffered through this and continue to suffer through.
Yeah.
We're still bound by the Indian Act. We're still bound by scarcity models. We're still bound by colonialism, by the doctrine of discovery, Terry and Elias, etc. Like every battle that's ever been won in Indian country is because we fought for it.
Yeah, we fought for it. It wasn't because the government felt bad and decided to turn something around. We fought for it.
It wasn't because corporations steps up. It wasn't because nonprofits offered monies. It wasn't because philanthropy was so generous. It wasn't education stepped up, and none of these institutions or spaces have
led any kind of
exactly.
Yeah.
We have led the charge. I'm guessing, because when I wrote Step into the River, a framework for economic reconciliation, at that time when I began my research, there were over 275 court cases that we have won in this country, right? Because we legally, most of the time, have to go to court to get what we want. Yes, for any transformation, for any change, for any precedent setting. And again, it's a colonial law. It's not our law. It's not our justice system that we're using. We are very much using Canada's system to prove whatever it is that they're expecting us to prove.
Yeah. For our basic human rights.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's why I get so frustrated when people are always just, well, where's the solutions? Where's the actions? And I'm like, we are coming to that.
Yeah.
But where do you think you're actually going to go with solutions and actions, like truly and meaningfully and impactfully, if you don't understand the truth, if you don't know Canada's true history?
Yeah. And I don't think just knowing, you can read books on this, but I think you really need to sit with the humanness, the feelings of our lived experience.
Exactly.
And validate it.
Yeah.
Sit in it and validate it for me. And then you can safely work together on how do we move forward.
Yes, exactly.
But I don't want you come charging in, okay, we're going to fix this. And da-da-da-da-da. I'm like, whoa, you're triggering me again.
Yes. Causing more harm.
Come and sit.
Yeah.
Really.
Let's have coffee, have tea, break some bread, build some relationship, and be together.
Yeah. The other thing that I've experienced too is the savior.
Oh, yeah.
I have all the answers. I'm going to come in and do this and this and this. I have answers. Sit with me and we can do them together.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't need a savior.
No, I don't need to be saved.
Yeah.
We have never needed to be saved.
Never needed
ever.
to be saved. Yeah.
No, not at all. Well, and I think that goes to, I think also to a previous episode where I think media, and in particular, like history books or even articles that are written today, you can I mean, as an Indigenous person, I can see the nuances of that white saviorism in those spaces. And again, just roll my eyes and this, oh my God.
So not only does that put them in a savior position, but that's indicating, oh, the poor little Indians
Yes.
need our help.
Yes, exactly.
Not that
No,
at all. That was something that was created again by all the systems that we're
exactly.
all forced to live in. I think one thing that's really needs to be said all of the time is how much all of these systems, the policies, everything has put everybody in silos, intentionally separating
Very much.
all of us, not just Indigenous from, all Canadians, but even all Canadians. We're all put in these silos because of how much money we make, what kind of neighborhood we live in, what kind of education do you have, were your parents, were they from here, were they not, did you come from, we're forever putting labels and othering people.
Right.
And that does so much harm.
Yes.
And I believe in some level that the federal government does that on purpose so that we aren't as empowered as we could be.
Yes.
Once we begin to break down silos, we become so much more powerful.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, and I think it's really intentional. The education system, the healthcare system, everything.
Yep.
Just everything separates us and separates us and separates us. It just happens that they did more separating with Indigenous people than anybody else that lives here.
Yes.
But I think if everybody really understood how harmful that separation is to other people, and it's the dehumanizing.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
It's the dehumanizing that gives permission for racism to exist. I mean, I don't have to tell anybody in the world right now the harm that the president is doing with his racist. It's just mind blowing. I can't even go there.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's given him the world permission to jump back into othering and dehumanizing human beings, treating them different because they have a different skin color, speak a different language. Oh my.
Right.
Ugh.
I know. And I want to go back to the truth, and just, I guess, call out some truths of, again, let's go back to the beginning of we, Indigenous peoples, literally the first peoples of our territories and of our lands. And you have to honor that, acknowledge that, hold that as truth, because it is truth.
Truth.
You are visitors to our territories, to our lands, and we welcomed you, right? Canada would not be a society if we did not welcome you to our territories, to our lands.
They couldn't have survived here.
They would have never survived here. And this is why settler Canadians are called settler Canadians, because you settled this land. Your intentionality was to take over, which you did, displaced us, stole our land, right? Unless there is a treaty, and even then the treaties were mostly like, there's friendship treaties, there's like all different kinds of treaties, but where we live, where I was born and raised, a majority of British Columbia is not treaty lands, which means it's unceded territory. And that's the truth. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about it. You can't get away from that because it's just true. It's fact. And the other truth is then that means that the land was stolen.
Yeah.
End of story.
Yeah.
Right? And that means we have to acknowledge the unceded territories. We have to acknowledge that there is a requirement for land back. And if not land back, then other solutions to that. And like we spoke about in our allyship, it needs to be done in right relationship. The other truths are all of the harm, that has come into our spaces of trying to remove our identity from us, our language from us, the land from us, all of our resources from us. Again, just literally about who we are and they wanted to destroy. And again, very intentionally. And I know that that is a harsh truth to hear and be uncomfortable with. And that doesn't even include all of the illegal things that we weren't allowed to do, like vote, like potlatch, like leave the reserve.
Right.
Like people don't know that there was a pass system, like
Mm-hmm.
for our parents to leave
The reserve.
the reserve, the Indian agent had to give him a pass. Like that's truth. And couldn't hire lawyers to protect our title and our right. We fought for everything that we have ever won.
Yeah. And that it was illegal for us to gather in groups of more than 5
Exactly.
for fear of an uprising.
Exactly. That our parents couldn't go to post-secondary, that you were enfranchised, etc. Just again, there's layers upon layers of knowing this truth and unpacking this truth and being with this truth. And is it hard and uncomfortable? Absolutely. But we deal with it every single day. Our children deal with it every single day. Right? Like, so immediately what comes to my mind when I talk about this is the harshness or hardness of just being Indigenous. I mean, it took Indigenous Services Canada 5 years to determine that my son was Indian legally under the Indian Act so that he could get a status card. 5 years. Blows my mind, right? Of just like, this is crazy. Listen, like the legalities and just this oppression and these institutions, again, of siloing.
Yeah.
Of siloing, right? And the fact that he didn't benefit from the Indian Act and being a status Indian until then, right? Because he wasn't legally deemed so.
Yeah.
You're again, this crazy chaos of what it is to
But yeah, he got to be in the world and experience racism as an
exactly
Indian. Yeah.
freely.
Yeah.
Freely, right? Because they didn't know what to do because he wasn't. I loved it because provincially, so federally,
Yeah.
he wasn't recognized.
Right.
But then provincially for healthcare, they were stuck kind of between this rock and the hard place because he wasn't status
Right.
and he didn't fit under that space, right? Kind of thing. And also because he was adopted and we were legally going through the process of that formalization of adoption in the first 6 months, that I wasn't biologically his, and to fit under that realm, like again, it was quite funny to see these systems flounder in their siloing with just even, again, the basics of, human rights and human care and, in our own country, in the country that is seen as one of, this place of kindness and generosity and peace and
the country
neutrality.
that the world thinks we are.
Exactly. But, this is our harsh reality and, but at the same time, as much as we're here to call out these truths and bring them to light and ask Canadians to, be in that and acknowledge that and wear that and don't shut it off like a piece of clothing either. Like wear it for a while and be with it for a while. And that there's also this immense wealth in being Indigenous, right? Like I always share with others that my wealth, again, I've mentioned this in previous episode, is not because I have accumulated financial wealth.
Yeah.
Because I own all of these things and I have this amazing paying job or whatever. That is not my wealth.
Yeah.
It's a tool.
Yeah.
but it's not my wealth, right? And I think you can speak to wealth culturally way more than I can by your experience, in that space.
Yeah, I was really fortunate that my father, even in his alcoholism,
Mm,
remained connected to
mm,
culture.
mm,
He would sober up long enough for us to go home to Alert Bay to Appalach. From the age of 4 and up, it was always me and him going home to Appalaches. And back then, before he was a chief, an actual chief, he was, serving. He was of service, however, whatever was needed to be done.
mm,
I would sit with my aunties and his aunties on the side,
mm.
be watching him, busy little bee, doing everything on the floor and behind the scenes. But I remember sitting there at the age of 4, still living in an alcoholic home, 4 years old. It was literally my first memory of life altogether. Sitting in the big house with all the aunties, and I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't involved. I wasn't singing. I wasn't dancing. I wasn't helping. It's a little 4-year-old girl sitting in the big house, witnessing.
Mm.
And I can remember just feeling
Right.
like that.
Mm.
I didn't have words for it then, but I do now. I felt safe. I mattered. I felt like I belonged. And I realized that was so big because I didn't feel like that anywhere else in my life.
Right.
Not my home, not my neighborhood, not the school. Nowhere
Mm,
did I feel that.
mm.
But sitting in there, and I wasn't even doing anything.
Right.
So hindsight, and with everything that I know now, that was embedded into our traditional ways of being.
Right.
Everything they did, everything they said, everything they sang, all the movements of the dances, the regalia, the masks, the history telling in all of that was so that we would all remember that we all belong, that we all matter, that we all have a purpose in this world.
Mm,
So that was really what helped me through the tumultuous times in my
mm,
life. All the rest of my world out here,
mm.
I'd be like, no, this, I could close my eyes and feel that way. And I still can. I'd be like, and be okay.
Right.
That really got me through when my parents were still heavy into alcoholism. There were the predators and everything going on. And hindsight really is, now I know that's what it is. That's what it was.
Right.
And it's that connection. We're not siloed in those cultural spaces. Yeah. And in my lifetime, I've done cultural exchanges all across, North America, Turtle Island.
Mm.
Many, many cultural exchanges. And it's the same. Everybody has a word or a phrase for Numwiut, that we are all one.
Mm.
That's what they were nurturing in that space, without having to say it. It was just our way.
Or define it.
Yeah, or define it. It's literally the reality that's missing, I think, in our colonial world.
Yes, very much.
The silos that were created because of all of it.
Mm.
And so everywhere I've traveled, we hear things like all my relations or not samak. Like on and on, like everywhere I've been, everybody has that value, word or phrase, and it all meant the same. So we all had that understanding and nurtured it and grew that in people. You belong, you matter. And so we would all wake up. Imagine if you felt like that every day waking up. Oh yeah, I matter. I'm valued. You would want to say, okay, so what can I do for the people in my life?
Exactly.
We would all wake up that way.
Exactly.
And I think that's how and why we thrived for thousands and tens of thousands of years before all of this. Because we woke up with that feeling, that purpose. Even in our songs and our dances and the movements that we do, everything's really intentional. It's not a free for all.
It's not a random.
Yeah. So if you learn the words, learn what they mean, and the appropriate hand movements, like for instance, in most of our songs there's a word, glugwala. And when I hear that word, I'll put my hands out, glugwala, because this is me receiving my gift from the universe, from the creator, whatever you want to call that, me receiving this gift.
Mm.
So I'm receiving the gift from the universe. And then I will internalize it because this is just for me. Can you imagine?
Yeah.
This is just for me. And so now I'm going to take all of this and share it with everybody in my world. So it isn't just for me. It's for me so that I can give it
Exactly.
to all of you, to lift you up, to give you that medicine,
Mm.
you that magic and that love. And on the song goes, speaking like that.
Mm.
Always about from the creator universe so that I can help people.
Mm.
All of it was continually speaking about every day, how am I going to show up and lift everybody up in my world?
Mm.
So imagine an entire community living that way. Yeah.
I go to when your dad and your family bestowed our son with his name to welcome him and to adopt him into our people.
Yeah.
And then learning, one, just that unto itself is exactly that receiving. That's what that was. It's way too long of a story to share what that means to me. But to use a metaphor, that's what it was. For all of us, for him. And then also the next piece in that journey was really, truly understanding what that meant, what his name meant. And again, just the bringing tears to our eyes, because our names are not, it's not like,
It's not a label.
no, it's not like, it's not just Leanne.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
His name has this true depth of meaning around, and it happens to be around sort of like wealth and well-being. And again, the resonating of that value system, this reciprocity, the relationship, the receiving and the giving and responsibility and accountability, like all of that is embedded just in a name, in the names that we receive, let alone the protocols and the ceremonies and all of the richness that comes with receiving it. But my son is now forever guided by all of that in his lifetime, right? And will then also be passed on to his children. My grandchildren, are just, again, so truly blessed.
Yeah.
And honored and privileged, because I see being Indigenous as a privilege. I see it as a true honor, a true gift. And I know that I am a spiritual being having a human experience. I know that my relationship to ancestors is through my spirituality, through my connectedness to the universe, to the energy and the life force that is around us, to my higher self, to my four-body system. And these are the teachings that, my husband and I are also passing on to our son, which, again, will be passed on to our grandchildren. And I also want to do a bit more reflecting on my son, the same experience he had. I was sharing with you outside of this space about the last potlatch we went to, which happened to be our cousin's potlatches. And same thing. He was just sitting in the big house. Things hadn't started. We weren't doing anything. It was just we were just there. And he did the same thing. He took a big breath. He let it out. And then he just quietly told me, "Mom, I feel like I'm home. And I was, of course, sobbing and just like, oh my gosh, because he summed it up.
Yeah. It's palpable.
Yeah, just amazing.
Yeah. And that's where our healing is going to come from.
Yes.
Those ancient ways of being there's no silos.
Yeah.
And it's lifting one another up.
Yeah.
My dad speaks really eloquently to all of this, of course.
Yes.
But in his book as well,
Yes.
he was blessed to literally have visions. I'm like, of course you had a vision.
Right.
He's had a few in his lifetime. But they're eloquently told in his book, Namwayut, a Namwayut, a reconciliation, a path forward. And he lives it.
Yes.
After we came out of the dysfunction of alcoholism, we're slowly learning how to love even. Because we didn't know how.
Right.
They didn't know how.
Right.
We didn't say I love you till I was a teenager, like 12. Maybe.
Well.
It wasn't
Well.
normal in our house.
Right.
And so, it was like, I love you. Really uncomfortable at first. But like you, me and my kids are like 50, 75 times a day. Like, you leave in your room, love you.
Yeah.
They're only in the next room.
I know.
They come out of the room, love you.
Love you.
Yeah. And I think that really is what all of that, at the core of that, is. Literally in Kwakwala, there's a word, flachwala, and that's a feeling, a grand feeling in our hearts, our rokai. But there isn't a word for love.
Right.
I think because
it's everywhere. It's in everything.
It just is.
It's embedded.
Yeah.
Right? Yes.
It just is. And I always talk about we're all born love.
Yes.
You put a little 1.5-year-old in a room with a great big burly man who's just like having a rough day. That little toddler is going to walk up and rub their back because that's our natural state as human beings.
Yes.
All of this hate, racism, silos, everything that's wrong in the world is taught. It is not our natural state. We're naturally love.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
We're love. It's this energy. And love is all around us. That's what you're looking for, that's what you're going to find. But if you're looking for racism and judgment and hate and more money and more materialism, that's what you're going to find.
Right. Yes.
All of that exists equally here.
Yes.
And I think the call to action for me, when we're talking about truth, healing, and reconciliation, what is it you're looking for?
Right. That's a great question.
Yeah. Don't be blindly guided into money, materialism, having more than everybody else, because that means other people are going to have less than.
Yes.
But if we're all coming and looking for a natural state of love, that's going to change everything.
Yes.
We can sit with our storytelling. We can sit in the vulnerability.
Yes.
We can sit in the uncomfortableness. We can sit in let's create a new relationship, move forward in a better way if we can tap into that. Love.
100%. I think that is the ultimate place to wrap up and close, because I don't think more needs to be shared, because I think that what you just shared is beautiful. It resonates. Hopefully it lands and people take that to heart, because that's literally what our call is and what we want for each other, and in relationship with settler Canadians and with all human beings.
Oh, everybody.
Yeah. It's not just for us, right? We're not holding this just for ourselves. We want the whole world to be this way. So
yeah, calling everybody into the fold.
Absolutely. Because we love you all.
Yes.
We love you all.
Love you.
Exactly. And we're going to be in forever relationship together moving forward. So, Osium and Gela Kesla, and thank you again for being with us for another episode.